Welcome to Around the World with Geoff. My name's Geoff Gibson, host of the popular YouTube channel Geography by Geoff, which is probably where you know me from. This is my brand new podcast where every episode we'll take a new country or state, province, maybe even sometimes cities, and we'll discuss the geography, history, visitor information, overview, all of that fun stuff into one episode that you can take either on the go through any podcast app you might like, or over on YouTube if you're watching this through my Geography by Geoff YouTube channel. Now, it's my pleasure to announce my very first guest, potentially. I'm not actually sure when this video is going to come out, but I'm very happy to welcome Kayleigh During of the History with Kayleigh channel. She's going to help us talk all about our country today. Kayleigh, how are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm post-op 3.5 weeks and life is better again.
Good. I'm glad it's doing better. I mean, that can't have been easy.
Yeah, it was very rough for a while. Like first couple of days, felt like dying. But hey, that's fine. Yeah, so when you ask a Dutch person or like a Northwestern European person, like, how are you? Expect a really, really honest answer.
I mean, that's kind of what this podcast is about. That's a great cultural indicator. I mean, I can ask that question to anybody here in the United States or probably Canada as well. And it's just sort of one of those glib responses. Oh, I'm doing fine.
Yeah. I've heard many stories and I've read many stories on Reddit as well about people that came to like Germany or the Netherlands or Belgium. And they were just stunned by the fact that people were constantly being too honest and, you know, TMI about their personal life and stuff they're dealing with.
Well, Kayleigh, you already kind of alluded to it, but go ahead and tell us where you're from and be as detailed as you like.
I am from the Netherlands and I was born in what we call the head of North Holland. So if you are a bit familiar with the map of the Netherlands, North Holland is on the left upper part and it is shaped a little bit like a head, like a face, like with the nose and everything. So I am born right in the middle of the head of North Holland, and I currently live on the coast of the IJsselmeer, which is the largest lake in the Netherlands. So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, Kayleigh, I have a little bit of a surprise because if you look just behind me, well, I have a map right here of the Netherlands.
Yes. And then
so
you
you're
can
talking about
see
this area right here?
No. Yes, that's the head. So you have the entirety of North Holland, but like the upper half of that is like called the head of North Holland. And it's also an area known as West Frisia. So you've got like Frisia, Friesland, and I am from West Frisia, West Friesland. Yeah. Yeah, it's not something that people are aware of.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what this podcast is all about, to help people get acquainted or better understand places that they don't normally know or understand, or at least don't have that much experience with. And you, Kayleigh, you're here to provide that extra context that certainly I don't have the expertise for. I'm not from the Netherlands. I'm not Dutch. I'm just a podcaster and YouTube maker over here in the United States. So, listener, as you can probably figure out, probably not a big surprise here, but today we're going to talk all about the Netherlands. So first question for you, Kayleigh, as we kick things off, because we like to establish a sort of an overview of what the place is, can you describe the geographic location of the Netherlands?
Well, here in the Netherlands, we always make the joke that we are the sewage point of Europe because we are the lowest point. And all the rivers from all the mountains more southern, that water will all flow through us out to the North Sea. So we are the lowest point, which is also where the name of the Netherlands comes from. In Dutch, it's called Nederland. Neder meaning below. So we are the lowlands, the low-lying lands, the Nederlanden. So that's where the name the Netherlands comes from as well. So yeah, we are the lowest point of Northwestern Europe, and all their waste and stuff comes through us in our rivers and then goes out into the North Sea. Yeah.
I expected a lot of answers, a lot of different ways you could have answered that, but I did not expect that you would call it the sewer of Europe.
We are the sewer of Europe. It's a Dutch joke, yeah.
So like you say, the Netherlands is located in Europe. Sometimes it's referenced as being part of Western Europe. Sometimes I've seen it referenced as part of Northwestern Europe. I do wonder if like maybe the Norwegians would consider the Netherlands part of Northwestern Europe. It does seem to be its whole other thing. I guess it's all the way up there in Scandinavia.
I think most of them do because they see themselves more as like Scandinavians, like as more often they see themselves as more separate from us, even though we have a lot of similarities, but like there's water between us. So we're on the continent, the northwestern part, yeah.
So, to be more specific, I guess the Netherlands would be part of another region within Europe that is, I guess, made up of what we would call the lowland countries, but is perhaps more, maybe not more, but perhaps also known as the Benelux region. Kayleigh, what is the Benelux region?
Okay, the Benelux is a cooperation of the countries. Yeah, the Benelux. So that's the Dutch pronunciation. So it's a cooperation between the countries of Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, which, you know, as you can hear in the name, Benelux. So it's the first letters of these countries. And this was established in 1944. And the aim of the Benelux is to strengthen the cross-border cooperation between the countries themselves. So like if you live in Belgium, you can work in Luxembourg. Or if you live in Luxembourg, you can work in the Netherlands. And there's like no issue with like taxes and all that stuff. So we are very fluid in where we can go, live, work, whatever. And one of the aims of the Benelux is to remain a leader within the European Union, because it was established way before the European Union became a thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like you're describing maybe a precursor to the European Union. I mean, these are three countries. These are three relatively small countries, the Netherlands, Belgium, and especially Luxembourg, which compared to, let's say, Germany or France, are really small in terms of population and even economy. And so combining their powers together likely results in a greater hand on sort of the European stage, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and like they were among the first 6 countries that started the entire European Union. Like it's currently very big, the European Union, but it was once started by just 6 countries, of which the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg were part of. And I think Germany, France, and England, but I could be wrong on that, on the England part. But yeah, I mean, this was the precursor to what we currently have as the European Union, but we still have our own Benelux system, and I'm very happy that we do. So yeah.
We all have big regrets with how we take care of ourselves on a daily basis. I'm certainly guilty of that myself. I probably shouldn't sit at my desk editing videos and podcasts for as long as I do, and I should probably also floss more. And here's a big one. I should absolutely take my daily nutrition more seriously. Thankfully, that last one has become much easier for me due to Field of Greens, a superfood powder that's made with real USDA organic fruits and vegetables. Now, maybe you can just eat more fruits and vegetables. I'm certainly trying to. But each fruit and vegetable in Field of Greens was selected by doctors to specifically support vital bodily functions like your heart, liver, kidneys, metabolism, and immune system. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to trace down all of those fruits and vegetables myself and eat them daily. Field of Greens lets me skip that whole process and improve my daily nutrition so that I can be healthier. And even better, Field of Greens is backed by a better health promise. At your next checkup, your doctor will notice your improved health or you'll get your money back. I've taken this very important step for my health, and you should join me. So let's get you started with 15% off and free shipping. Visit fieldofgreens.com and use promo code Geoff, that's promo code GEOFF at fieldofgreens.com for 15% off and free shipping. Well, let's go ahead and dive a little bit more into the Netherlands. We're going to leave Belgium and Luxembourg behind because they're not the focus of today's video. Again, maybe we'll someday have somebody on from those countries, and maybe we'll have the same or very similar conversation. I'll get their interpretation of what Benelux is and maybe how they see themselves fit inside that triad of countries. But let's go ahead and turn our attention back to the Netherlands. So, Kayleigh, you broadly know what we're going to talk about today. It's not a huge secret. You knew we were going to talk about the Netherlands. I even prepared a bunch of questions that I sent to you so you could even be better prepared. However, I do maintain a few questions of my own that are, let's say, a little more trivia-ish. And this is just I'm not here to try and stump you, But I think it's fun to, let's see how much you know a little bit about your own country, and let's get the listener involved, get them thinking as well. So the first question I have for you today, Kayleigh, that you did not know ahead of time is all about population. Do you know how many people live in the Netherlands today?
Yeah, I do. The estimate is like 17 point something million. So it's not that much.
That's basically right. It's almost 18 million as of, well, the most recent estimates. Of course, population estimates are a little bit tricky, so who knows actually how many people are in any given country. That said, we can generally assume there's probably about 18 million people in the Netherlands. And you had mentioned it's kind of small, but actually I would argue that's kind of large, because the Netherlands is not a large country physically in terms of its area size. So it brings about a density of people that you almost see in no other country, and certainly not in the United States, certainly not in Canada or any of these other really large countries that do. Well, the United States does have a really large population, but it's not as densely populated as the Netherlands is. All told, this would make the Netherlands the 11th most populated country in the world. It's not too far down the list. In fact, it's right behind Romania, and it's just above Belgium, so your nearest neighbor almost. And of course, this is only within Europe, and this includes Turkey. Sometimes that country is included when we take in European statistics. Sometimes it's not. Again, maybe I'll have somebody on from Turkey one day, and we can ask sort of how they feel about being included or sometimes not included within Europe statistics and sort of standards and all that kind of fun stuff. Kayleigh, do you consider Turkey to be part of Europe?
They're more like, I personally feel like they're too far southeast to be like part of the European continent, like the European culture and all that stuff. Like there's a separation between the Turkish culture and the European culture. I think that they're more different from the rest of us. So I would say part of the Union, not necessarily part of like being a European. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're sort of describing here is something that applies to a few key places or regions or countries around the world where they sort of geographically are situated within sort of this middle area where they kind of don't fit with any of the surrounding areas because it's kind of a mixing zone, right? So Turkey, for example, sort of rides that area in between Europe and Southwest Asia, or more commonly referred to as the Middle East and even Asia. And it's like, well, how does it fit? And that it kind of falls along its own geography, right? So if we're looking more towards Istanbul, sort of, inside the West, very close to Europe, probably a little bit more of a European feel. Now, if you look all the way over to the East, it's going to feel a lot more like Middle East.
Also, like I think the Netherlands is one of the most densely populated countries in Europe.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where the Netherlands is not technically one of the most populated countries in the world. However, it is one of the densest countries in the world, just because there's a lot of people within a very small area. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. But let's take Amsterdam as an example, right? This is a city that has this very urban feel to it. There's a lot of cyclists. There's just a lot going on compared to, let's say, your average city in the US or Canada, such as, Des Moines, Iowa, or Houston, Texas. There's a lot of large lot single family houses inside these American and Canadian cities where everybody's just a lot more spread out. And if you go on a walk, maybe you walk by one or two people, and that's kind of it.
Absolutely. Like what blew my mind was once when I was in Egypt, I heard that Cairo had like 22 million inhabitants. Like that's their capital city. Capital city had more people than the entirety of the Netherlands. And I was like, okay, no, we're not that extremely densely populated, but we kind of are.
Yeah, so we've already talked about the Netherlands, where it falls within the European sort of population sphere, right? Right above Belgium, right below, I can't remember who, but we'll go back and listen to it. Would you like to hazard a guess on where the Netherlands falls in terms of a global ranking?
I would say probably still top 10.
In terms of global population? No, not maybe population density probably, but like total population.
Oh, total population. Oh, sorry. Yeah, low, no, no, like way low. It's like nothing.
Well, it actually might surprise you because it's still top half in terms of global
No.
population. I'll just go ahead and tell you the Netherlands would be the 68th largest country in the world. That's out of around 193 countries. I think that's the latest United Nations, how many countries they count, anyways. It would be right behind the country of Somalia over in the Horn of Africa. Though it should be or should be pointed out, I should say, that Somalia's population estimates are definitely more rough than, let's say, the Netherlands. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We don't need necessarily get into it, but I would argue they're probably a lot less accurate. So who knows, I think, actually where it falls specifically. But broadly, it's probably going to be in that mid 60-ish region, depending on how things actually fall, which would be in the top half, like I already mentioned. So fairly populous overall. Again, a small country, 18 million, but a lot of places don't even have that amount of people, as it turns out.
Turns out, yeah. I learned something today.
Right. So, Kayleigh, another question for you. Can you tell me the top 5 largest cities in the Netherlands?
Top 5? Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Den Haag.
You got the top 3 already.
Yeah, I mean, those were like super easy. Utrecht.
Yeah, that's number 4.
And I'm going to say like Eindhoven.
Wow, you got it. No, those are the top 5 cities in the Netherlands. That's actually really impressive. Most people, I feel like, aren't going to get this, and you kind of sort of stumped me a little bit. I wasn't expecting that.
For me, it's kind of easy because I know that the Holland part is most densely populated because of the Randstad. So yeah, that has to be the top 4. And then it was like either something in Friesland or Brabant. So yeah.
Now, of those top 4 that you just listed, let's say Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague, Den Haag, as you said, and Utrecht, 4 of them are in something that you just mentioned, the Randstad. Mm-hmm. What is the Randstad? I think this is a concept that is a little unfamiliar, especially for those of us in the United States.
Yeah. So the Randstad, as we say in the Netherlands, is an area in North and South Holland. And it is the most densely populated because of the fact that most businesses are operating in this area, which means that it has the most job opportunities, and that leads to it being densely populated. We also have the massive harbor, the biggest harbor in Europe, in the harbor of Rotterdam, the haven van Rotterdam. And we used to have like a harbor in Amsterdam, and The Hague, Den Haag, as you know, it has like our entire political system is located there. It's not located in our capital. And Den Haag is very densely populated because of the fact that it houses all those people as well. And yeah, I mean, the Randstad is for us a place, if you can, try to avoid. If you can, I feel very bad for you being in traffic all day. Yeah.
So, final question before we move on to something that's a little more my bread and butter, which is the physical geography of the Netherlands. Kayleigh, outside of your hometown or your nearest, major city to your hometown, if that's sort of the case for you, what's your favorite city in the Netherlands?
So my favorite city, I've lived in the city of Haarlem, but I mean, it's either Utrecht, because Utrecht is just absolutely beautiful. It has like that feel of Amsterdam without the amount of tourists that Amsterdam has, and with the amount of like you smell green stuff wherever you go. You don't really have that much in Utrecht. But it does have like that historic feel and the canals, and it's just beautiful with the Domtoren, beautiful church tower. So yeah, it's either Utrecht or Alkmaar. And Alkmaar is the city I grew up near to. And Alkmaar in the head of North Holland is just, it's my favorite city. It's not crowded. There's not too many people. You have a beautiful church, beautiful streets where you can just shop, and like the feel of it is so historic. And it was it was the first place where the Dutch um, stopped the siege of the Spaniards during the 80 Years' War. And you can just feel that history. Right outside the city, the old city walls, you have like cannonballs and old cannons that we used to fight off the Spaniards. It's just beautiful. It's my absolute favorite city of all time, but not many people have heard about it. So yeah, Alkmaar. And if you like beer and cheese, they have like this square called the Waagplein. And on one end, you have like a beer museum, and on the other hand, you have a cheese museum. So you don't even have to walk that far.
Well, hold on to those thoughts, Kayleigh, because we are actually going to get to a little bit of visitor, sort of tourist information at the end of today's episode. It's a little thing for our listeners to actually stick around all the way to the end. For now, we're going to jump to the physical geography of the Netherlands. We're going to talk about, well, sort of the, how does it actually look and feel, as you're there? What is sort of the landscape surrounding you when you're there? And again, we talked a little bit about that in our overview section that we just ran through, but we're going to dive deeper. We're going to dive a little bit deeper here. So, like many of you, I have big summer plans this weekend. They involve a barbecue Friday night, followed by an early morning hike on Saturday. Unfortunately, I don't bounce back the next day like I used to after having a few drinks. Normally, this means I'd have a choice to make: enjoy myself at the barbecue or enjoy myself on my early morning hike. I couldn't do both, but that was before ZBiotics. ZBiotics, the world's first genetically engineered probiotic, is a pre-alcohol probiotic drink that helps me tackle those rough mornings after drinking. Here's how. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme that breaks this byproduct down, letting you enjoy yourself no matter where your weekend might take you. You just have to remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel great tomorrow. I actually didn't think this would work, but I gave it a shot a couple weeks ago at a wedding, and I had a much more enjoyable time. So go to zbiotics.com/Geoff to get 15% off your order when you use GEOFF at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're left unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/Geoff and use code GEOFF at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, ZBiotics, for sponsoring this episode and our good times. Can you, Kayleigh, tell us a little bit about the physical landscape or geography where you live presently, where you're at right now?
Where I live presently. So that's still a bit new to me, to be completely honest, because I have not lived here for like a year and a half, more than that. Like I haven't lived here that long. So I currently live in a very, 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 very small town. Like it has less than 2,000 inhabitants officially. So that's like, even in Dutch standards, like that's super small. And I think maybe 700 meters away from the dike that keeps me dry from the IJsselmeer, the biggest lake. And we are below water. So, I mean, yeah, we need that dike. And the dikes are like checked very often. But the physical features of this area, it's nearly the same as where I was born in. So it's farmland. It's very low lying farmland. So like the roads will be like on this height and the farmland will be around this height. So there will be a height difference between all of the land that the farmers use to like grow cauliflower and potatoes and tulips and all that stuff. And the reason that their land is situated lower is because, irrigation and all that stuff and water. And we keep the roads dry by having them go up here, and we make sure that the land for the farmers is wet at all times, which is good because we experience droughts as well. So as far as you can see, it's mostly farmland, and here and there you have scattered like a little town here and a little town there. And then like it's a bit like that. Where I was born is a little bit different because I was born on what is called a natural long dike. And that town its name translates to long dike. And I lived in the part that was called Pants on Long Dyke. So, I mean, it's weird. But the area there was a little bit different because they had a man-made lake. And here where I currently live, there is a lake which is a remnant of the Southern Sea. So that's a difference. So the biggest lake in the Netherlands, IJsselmeer, used to be the Southern Sea. So that used to be salty and connected to the North Sea. But we created the Afsluitdijk, massive long dike, where we can drive our car over and all that fun stuff. And over time, the water there became fresh. So we have now a massive two parts. You have Markermeer and the IJsselmeer, but the IJsselmeer is the largest. So we have two massive lakes, and they're now currently freshwater, but they used to be salty.
I mean, you just hit on so much of what we're going to talk about in this section, Kayleigh. So the Netherlands is a famously very flat country. In fact, a lot of it's underwater. It's below the sea level. Apparently, it's the sewer of Europe. This is your words, Kayleigh, not mine. Don't come at me with any of this. I'm not claiming that is is what I'm calling the Netherlands. But I thought it was very funny, so I wanted to bring it back up. Now, normally, as part of this section, Kayleigh, we would run through things such as like the tallest mountain ranges or the tallest mountain peaks, but you don't really have any, as it turns out. At least not to the same degree as, let's say, Switzerland, which is, surrounded by mountains and is within the Alps, right? But you do have a tallest, well, let's call it a hill. You have a tallest hill. Do you know what and where that tallest hill in the Netherlands is?
Oh, yeah. It's located all the way like south. I think it's along like the most southern point of the Netherlands. It's called the Vaalser Berg. Berg being the word for mountain, so like the Vaalser mountain. But I mean, it's not even officially a hill according to some countries' standards.
Yep, that is 100% true. The tallest point in the Netherlands would be this Vosselberg, as you called it, Vaalserberg, which stands at a whopping 1,058 feet above sea level, or 322 meters for you, or for our European audience, or kind of rest of the world audience, I should say.
It's cute.
It is definitely not a mountain. I mean, there's a park here in the middle of Portland where I'm at that is probably about as tall, when you can sort of walk up to the top of it. And I have seen pictures of it, and again, it's definitely a hill. Definitely a hill. In fact, the Wikipedia article for it, and I have it right here, describes it as a hill. So all that's to say, this is the tallest point in the Netherlands. So it's a very, very low-lying country. And it does sit in that very far southeast part of the country, the hill itself. It's basically on the border of with Belgium and Germany. So if you're looking at a map, it's like way tucked down there somewhere.
Yeah, like I said, like this most southern point that you can imagine, nearly like that. It's there. Yeah.
But where the Netherlands sort of lacks in its sort of high ground or its mountainous landscape, it definitely makes up for in going lower. And so the Netherlands is a very famously lowlands country. And you've already talked about this, but it's kind of started to do something that is very interesting in terms of where people are able to live today, in that they're now able to live in areas that were previously water. And so, and these are stats that I found, 26% of the Netherlands' total area is underwater, and 21% of its population, which might even include you right now, Kayleigh, exists below the sea level. This is the highest percentage of almost any other place, and certainly of any other country on the planet. But I think of any other region on the planet as well, which is really incredible. And this brings us to a sort of question that I had for you. You've already talked a little bit about this, but this gets us to a word that is kind of commonly thrown around when you start talking about the geography of the Netherlands, and that is this word polder. What is a polder?
So I live in a polder area. I was born in a polder area. So the polder area is an area of land that used to be underwater. Like, doesn't matter if that was like a lake or a river or just through irrigation, but it was a land that was underwater that we reclaimed by pumping out or draining the water and then building a dike around it to keep the water at bay. And because polders are always at risk of being flooded back with the water. So that's also why we have so many windmills, or like we used to have so many windmills, because those windmills were used to pump out the water. And so that we could reclaim land and live on it, because it was marshy and we didn't have much land. And then we also created an entire province and, pumped out a large section of one of the big lakes, the Markenmeer. And we created Flevoland, our 12th province. So yeah, I mean, it ain't much, but it is Dutch. And they say that God created the earth, but the Dutch created the Netherlands.
I think of any other country in the world, that definitely seems the most appropriate.
Yeah.
Because, well, and I've heard this said before, especially amongst geographers, that the Netherlands, that the Netherlands in a way has truly been able to master water or water management in a way that nobody else has in the history of our planet.
Yeah. Yeah, we are currently still working. If I'm correct, we are currently still working in New Orleans with like what happened with Katrina, and we're still, as Dutch people, our engineers are still helping them figure out a way to live with the water instead of against it. And we are also currently working near Venice to make sure that Venice doesn't sink deeper. So we're trying to help the Italians with saving Venice. So yeah, we are being asked all around the globe to help people with water management and how to live with the water. You can't fight it. The water will always win. You can't fight it. But you have to figure out a way to live in this state of respect for both each other, so that the water will respect you as you respect the water. So you will, of course, reclaim that land and pump it completely dry and get away with all you moist. But then at the same time, you have to figure out a way to respect the fact that that water will always try and come back. So yeah, it has to become like a synergy.
Yeah, it's funny because just very recently over on my YouTube channel, I guess this YouTube channel, if you're watching this right now on YouTube, I did a video comparing New Orleans to the Amsterdam, which is funny because there's this perception here, at least here in the United States, that New Orleans is a doomed city. It's living on borrowed time. In fact, it is losing a lot of its land, and it's underwater. It has to share a lot of the same traits as Amsterdam in a lot of ways. There are some differences, of course, but there's a reason why the Dutch have been able to keep Amsterdam safe, and it's considered to be a thriving city into the future. But New Orleans is doomed. I think that's really interesting. I think that really does highlight the expertise that the Dutch have that we simply don't have here in the United States or in New Orleans. I live a pretty active life when I'm not talking about geography. I play in a couple different soccer leagues. I enjoy a good hike. And most of all, I walk basically everywhere, even if it's a hot summer day and I've just taken a shower. And this means I work up a sweat basically all over my body. That's not great when I'm meeting up with my girlfriend for a date or heading over to a friend's house and I need to take off my shoes. And that's why I'm so excited to have found Mando, the whole body deodorant that actually lasts for 72 hours. I've put this to the test and came away shocked that Mando was still working every place I put it. But more than simply being a great deodorant, it smells wonderful. The very first day I applied it, I got a compliment from my girlfriend. I'm not somebody who usually wears cologne, and with Mando, I don't feel like I need to. In particular, I really like the Mount Fuji stick, which has a refreshing woodsy smell that instantly reminds me of Oregon's great forests. So control your body odor anywhere with Mando and get $5 off your starter pack with promo code Geoff at shopmando.com. That's promo code GEOFF at shopmando.com for $5 off your starter pack. So with that, Kayleigh, we are going to leave behind the physical geography. There's obviously a lot more that we could always say, but we only have a very finite amount of time. So let's go ahead and jump to a little bit of history. And again, we're doing highlights here. There's not a lot. We're not doing a lot of depth, but it's going to be a lot of fun. All right. So Kayleigh, you are a history YouTube personality, History with Kayleigh. Go check it out, listener, if you haven't already. A lot of really amazing videos over there. But I like to make this caveat because I don't want people to think that you're automatically an expert on the history of the Netherlands. There's obviously history is a vast field with an incredible amount of depth, and so we're not here claiming that. We're not here claiming that you're the expert. So if we don't get into as much detail that, or you're not able to provide as much detail, Kayleigh, that's totally fine. People can go and follow up, and you know what? Do their own research.
Yeah.
So first question right off the bat, as we get into our history section, what were you taught in history class, maybe in your version of high school or primary school, about the Netherlands that you don't think anybody else would really know because they're simply not from the Netherlands?
Okay. So I got two answers for this one, if I may. The first is that the Netherlands suffered an 80 years long war, which didn't last for 80 years. So like what the name, but it was against the Spaniards, and the Spaniards were like trying to take us over, and they were besieging all our cities and towns, and they just, we didn't want them here. So Willem de Zwijger, the Willem of Orange, we all heard about him. He went to England, all that fun stuff. He left us for a while, but it was to keep him safe so that we could, win. So the Spaniards were sieging Alkmaar, as I said a little bit earlier, and the city was really suffering, and the entire country was suffering for a long time already at this point. And because this is a polder area, like I mentioned, it's very low compared to the rest of the country, and we are very much below sea level. Willem had the idea to break down the dikes. It was like in the fall, autumn, not necessarily winter period. It was October the 8th, which is also a very important date for everyone in Alkmaar, because it was the day that they got back their freedom from the Spaniards, because we broke down those dikes. And we flooded the Spaniards, and they left the area, and that was the first time the Dutch overcame a siege, which also turned everything around during the 80 Years' War, and it eventually led to the independence of the Netherlands and us having a monarchy and everything, and the Golden Age and all that stuff afterwards. But if that did not happen at Alkmaar, our country would not have been what it is today. So,
yeah, so obviously I did a little bit of research into the Netherlands, the history of the Netherlands, and I did learn a little bit about the Spaniards and sort of the siege and sort of the fight for independence that the Netherlands had to go through with against Spain. But what I would never have guessed was that the Netherlands would have used their knowledge of water management and the polders specifically as a weapon against their invaders. That's absolutely incredible. Obviously, you're doing damage to your own land, but you're going to be able to rebuild that and seal it back off again. If you're the Dutch, and whereas the Spanish, I don't think the Spanish have that expertise, at least not nearly to the same degree.
No. And like I said, it was like in the fall area, like October is very wet and cold. So, there was a lot of water that wanted to like completely flood that area. Yeah. The other answer that I have is called, it's like an area here in the head of North Holland that we drained. That is one of the best, biggest polders that we created. It's called the Schermer. It's that area. And it still has like 3 of the original windmills left, and I've often photographed them and like stood next to these windmills, because knowing that entire area used to be below sea, and like used to be like a massive lake called the Schermer. It's now place of multiple towns and not part of the Randstad, but like just slightly above it. And it's quite densely populated. It has some farmland. We have the most beautiful tulip fields there as well. So, I mean, it's nowadays a beautiful area, but when I studied construction many years ago, we were taught about how we drained the Schermer, and it was like the 1600s something. And yeah, the town that I was having my education in, and that used to be water that couple hundred years before, and we created land. And to me, that was just insane that we live on a place that didn't house people a couple hundred years ago. Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's so dang impressive what the Dutch have been able to do. The amount of land that you all have been able to reclaim from the ocean of all things. I mean, it's the ocean. But you all have been doing this for, I mean, hundreds of years at this point. And none of this is new. You're not new at this.
No.
You're not figuring out sort of, I mean, maybe you're figuring out some new technologies you're improving, but none of this is, I guess you're building off of decades, hundreds of years of being able to do this.
Yeah, like I said with my birth town, like I said earlier, we created a lake there, like people in, I think, around 1,000 years ago, when people started to live on that naturally long dike. They also noticed that there was water that wanted to come in. So the men of that town started digging like a bit outside of town, and they started digging and digging and digging, and they created a natural lake, like the man-made lake called the Geestmerambacht. And it's like geest is the word for ghost, and man is of course man, and ambacht is like work. So it's called the ghost man work because those men created that lake. And to keep the water at bay so that the town was like safe, all that water would like go to the lowest point. Like it's a sewage system, just like the Netherlands, lowest point of Europe. Then if you want to have a town and it's like 1,000 years ago and you can't build a dike yet because you haven't figured out how to do that, well then create a lake. Then the water will go there.
Absolutely astonishing. I mean, it's truly impressive. I mean, you hear about places like New Orleans. Well, the Dutch are going to be busy for a long, long time. They're going to have to help the world figure this out. How to manage this water that's going to be sea level rise is happening, right? We see this happening. So let's get back to a little bit of history before we wrap this section up. You had already talked about the Spaniards and the sort of that was the war that was going on at the time, the war for independence that the Dutch fought. The Netherlands we know and love today is an independent entity, and it can be traced. It can trace its independence back to this moment, this 80 Years' War, which I think was originally declared in 1581. Although I think, at least as far as my notes here, it wouldn't get recognition until 1648 with the Treaty of Westphalia, which is something that I've talked about on my other podcast, Geography is Everything, quite a bit. But it should be pointed out that Spain was really not all that interested in granting the Netherlands independence. Probably to nobody's surprise, that doesn't happen very often. And as such, as you mentioned, the Dutch would have to fight for it. And so after a long period of fighting, they would win. And then they would hit something, or they would get something that we now refer to as the Dutch Golden Age. Kayleigh, what was that?
So the Dutch Golden Age was the time where we Dutch were just absolutely thriving as a country. We were nearly as strong as the British during this time, especially when you look at like the global trade that we were doing. The only reason that like New York nowadays is called New York is because we lost one of the Dutch Anglo Wars to the British, and then they got New Amsterdam, which then they named New York. I mean, what can you do? We had a couple New Amsterdam places, like even in Australia, it was New Amsterdam for a while. And Zealand nowadays is still named after, or like New Zealand is still named after our province of Zeeland. So yeah, I mean, we globally thrived. We had an insane spice trade with like colonies. We had colonies all over the Americas, the Southern Africa, Asia, like Indonesia, mostly was Dutch. Um, the Dutch Golden Age, we had incredible art. We had it's crazy to think that we had so much that was incredible, but at the same time tainted because of like the slave trade and all the bad things that we've done, because we have done bad things. Like I can sit here and talk about how amazing we were, but we have done bad things. And I'm aware of that. I didn't take part in it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but it shaped my country into what we know today. It also is one of the reasons why the international court is located in The Hague, Den Haag, because we have done bad things, but we also recognize that in a way. We have apologized to many countries that we controlled for a very long time, where we had slaves, and we have apologized to Suriname and the Dutch Caribbean, to Indonesia, where we also had colonies, South Africa, as most people will know. We've tried to make amends and do better, yeah, as a people. But it all started in the Dutch Golden Age, yeah.
I mean, I'm certainly no stranger to being from a country that has a very sordid history, let's say. I mean, obviously, the United States had a very well-known slave trade, and we even fought a whole war called the U.S. Civil War to end that,
Yeah.
the aspect of slavery within this country. And I think most countries, at least a lot of countries, can say the same. I mean, there are certainly a lot of European countries, certainly countries that were spawned out of European countries, have, again, a history that is very sordid in a lot of ways. So, right. So like United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, there's always that aspect of their histories. And I think what you're hitting on, Kayleigh, is, there's a lot of nuance there. So you're hitting on the high, like the highs of the Dutch Golden Age, which is great, right? The Dutch Golden Age was a very prosperous time for the Netherlands. Yeah. And this is when, for example, the Amsterdam got its canal system that's very famous for today. And they had a lot of wealth during this time too. But it was on the backs of a lot of people, colonies and slavery, outright slavery. You did bring up New Amsterdam versus New York. Personally, I think, well, this is nothing against New York City today. I think New Amsterdam is a much cooler name, personally. I'm here, I have this thing. I'm located here in Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon is a rather large city in the United States, about 2.5 million people inside our entire metropolitan area. But it was named after Portland, Maine, in sort of the east coast of the United States, which is a very small city, sort of a bit north of Boston. And to me, when Portland, Oregon became the city, when it became a city, it sort of became the Portland. Unless you're really close to Portland, Maine, most people are going to think of Portland, Oregon here in the United States. So we often think about this with respects to New York as well, right? Had it been New Amsterdam, I wonder how that would have changed things. Would people think, I mean, nobody really thinks of York, the city, unfortunately. I'm sure it's a wonderful place within England, the United Kingdom. But New York is, it's New York. It's a dominant city globally. It's perhaps the most dominant in a lot of respects. That's not to say Amsterdam would have, not grown, but I don't know. It's just, it's interesting to see how these sort of things might change the course of history when the very name of a place gets subsumed by another place.
Especially like the Brooklyn part of it, like Brooklyn and Wall Street. Like Brooklyn was named after Breukelen. Harlem was named after Haarlem. Those are cities in the Netherlands. And then, of course, like Wall Street, that was where the wall of New Amsterdam was located. So like, what do you mean Wall Street? It was a wall. Yeah.
It's funny because there's an actual old map of New Amsterdam now, today New York. It's sort of the Manhattan Island, and you can see the wall from for Wall Street is named for. It's right there. It's Wall. the Brooklyn and Harlem thing that you brought up, I actually didn't know that. I didn't know Brooklyn and Harlem were named after Dutch places. I think that's been, at least inside the United States side of it, it's kind of been lost to history a little bit.
Yeah, and the layout of like the straight lines of New York, that was it. Because even nowadays, when we make like towns and suburbs and all that stuff, it's usually just like absolute straight lines. Makes it easier.
I mean, no surprise. Have you seen an English city? They're messes. They're absolute messes.
Yeah, exactly. They couldn't plan that.
So let's get to the final part of our history section today. It's something I'm going to call, or I'm calling, the hot and not section. So we're going to do this for each individual country as we run through them, listener. So come back for each episode to get this. So, Kayleigh, what would you say is the Netherlands, or who would you say, I should say, is the Netherlands' most famous person in history? And then who is its most infamous person?
So most famous person for everyone around the globe who likes football, which is for the American viewers, soccer, not the American football stuff. We actually use our feet with this, okay? Not just for one kick, but football. Johan Cruyff, the legendary Dutch football player who is just one of the best football players of all time. Yeah, absolutely well known. Doesn't matter where I go. If I say I'm Dutch, it's always, Johan Cruyff. And my lucky number is also 14, which is also the Cruyff number. So, I mean, yeah, Cruyff. And I love football, so yeah. Most infamous person is Joran van der Sloot. He was the murderer of Natalie Holloway on the island of Aruba. Natalie Holloway, of course, was an American young girl. And he made her body disappear, and then for many years pretended like he had nothing to do with it until he was exposed on TV by one of our incredible crime fighters who unfortunately was shot and killed a while back, Peter R. de Vries. And Joran van der Sloot then was a free guy, and he went to Peru, and there he killed another woman. And so he was jailed and currently situated in a jail in Peru because he murdered a woman there. He's also gotten married while being in the jail, and I think he's gotten a child with another woman. It's all weird. And he recently made a plea deal with the family of Natalie Holloway and the American whatever justice system he finally came clean a while ago that he indeed murdered Natalie Holloway, and he's indeed the murderer of her, because her family was still like, everyone was sure he did it, but he never pleaded guilty. He never came clean. He never said how it happened. He never anything, and recently he did. And I kind of hate his face and everything about him.
Well, yeah. Kayleigh, I was not expecting a little bit of a true crime part of today's episode, if I'm being honest, because we're a geography podcast, but on my other podcast, Geography is Everything, I say geography is everything, and here you go, true crime and geography being mixed at last. So let's go ahead and hit our very final section today. This is the visitor information tourist section. I don't know what I'm calling it quite yet. Now, listener, you're probably wondering, what is it like to actually go and visit the Netherlands if you haven't been there? So let's go ahead and get to our very first question right out of the gate. Kayleigh, if somebody only had a single day, one day, to visit the Netherlands, but they could go anywhere, do anything within the country, I guess within the legal bounds, where would you send them?
So it depends on what you like. If you like nature, I highly recommend going to the Veluwe, which is the part of the east, like in the middle of the east. It's a beautiful area in the provinces of Drenthe and Gelderland and Overijssel, those three. It has beautiful forests, long stretches of nature where you can just walk for hours, barely see any humans, see some wild animals. It's magnificent. It's one of the best places the Netherlands has to offer. You can also stumble upon one of the 52 dolmens of the Netherlands
Hmm.
while you're there. So, I mean, highly recommend going there if you like nature and a little bit of like that type of history. If you like more of like city feel, go for like a city of Utrecht or Alkmaar that I mentioned earlier. It's got the feel of Amsterdam without the crowds and the tourists. And the people there in general are way nicer because they don't necessarily expect tourists going there compared to like Amsterdam, where tourists are kind of like puked on because it's just completely filled with foreigners and there's barely any Dutch people left. If you go to Amsterdam, you order in like a cafe, something to drink or something to eat, you have to order in English. Even as a Dutch person, I cannot order in Dutch anymore in my own capital city because you have to speak English because people that are serving you are probably foreigners and they don't speak Dutch. So if you want that feel of like the real Dutch stuff, go to one of those two cities.
So you've already mentioned it, Kayleigh. Amsterdam, that is let's say that's the big place that people like to go visit when they go to the Netherlands. In fact, as of my most recent statistics, Amsterdam gets over 5 million international tourists every year. That's not even including sort of the internal national tourists. In fact, I don't even think that's including the European Union because the people could just take a car trip over there and not cross any sort of border check. So I'm not sure how that's being tracked, but that's still a phenomenon. That's an enormous amount of tourists every single year for a single city. So I have a very funny, let's say, anecdote, or I guess it's not even an anecdote. It's more of a news story that came from 2023. Apparently, during this year, Amsterdam began running an ad campaign within Britain to actively dissuade British men between the ages of 18 and 35 from coming to the city as tourists. And the ad basically shows young men being handcuffed by police and is part of basically the city's trying to clean up its reputation. And I guess the British have been well known to use the city as a place for stag parties, mostly, maybe hen parties as well. This would be or bachelorette parties if you're here in the United States. And I don't know if it's for this reason specifically, but I have to imagine it's likely because of the very famous red light district. How do the Dutch feel about the red light district in Amsterdam?
So it's part of our culture, but that doesn't mean that we all like it. I personally have like nothing with it. I think most Dutch people go there around, like go to the red light district area. The red light district is like one street, like and not even a whole street. It's like very small. Used to be a little bit bigger, but it's like very small. But you go to like the area, you don't even have to like go into the street itself. You just go around it and you can just see that it's flooded with tourists. And we Dutch people, I think most of us have gone there in our early teens because, it's cool. You go to Amsterdam, you go to the red light district. Yeah, you see a half naked woman and then you're like, seen enough. And I think that for most boys, like that experience is going to be a lot different than my personal experience of like, yeah, seen enough. They probably loved it, but I personally do not understand the appeal to it. Alkmaar, the city I grew up in, also had a red light district, also had like a street. It's not as famous, but yeah, you sometimes had to walk through it because the streets next to it were like crowded with other stuff. And then you have to like walk through it and it's like, yeah, I see women in lingerie in front of a window and they're like trying to get you to pay and do things. And then it's like, yeah, no, not my thing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I did once spend quite a bit of time in the Netherlands. I did a study abroad there. I was actually down over in Delft, which is a little bit south of Amsterdam, I believe. But I would go up to Amsterdam occasionally. It's relatively quick train ride to get up there. I mean, everything's kind of a quick train ride in the Netherlands, right? But I do remember walking through the red light district. Just one of those things, you have to see what it's like. And the curiosity, right? There's a strong curiosity. We don't have this in the United States. And it's very famous. But what was perhaps most interesting to me when I was doing this wasn't the actual red light district itself, but it was I think you already alluded to, Kayleigh, was the tourists. In fact, I recall when I was going through it, that there was a family, perhaps American, perhaps Canadian. I don't remember exactly where they might have been from. I actually didn't know where they were from, but it was a mother, a father, and sort of two relatively young girls. And it was so interesting seeing them walk through this street. It felt so weird, and a part of me kind of felt for the people who are working there inside the red light district, because they're trying to work. This is their job, and yet now it's being sort of treated as like a sideshow of sorts. And this is all really interesting because you already mentioned that your hometown Alkmaar has a red light district. I've been to Hamburg, and they also have a red light district of sorts. So this isn't like a super uncommon occurrence within Europe overall. Maybe it's not in every single city, but Amsterdam's is definitely the most famous. Globally, it's probably the most famous. And I wonder how did Amsterdam get that? How did the red light district become so famous just for the city?
I think it also has to do with the movie, like Turks Fruit, Turkish Fruit. It was a movie, I think, in the 80s, but I could be wrong. I only know the Dutch rendition of said movie, but I know it was also made for like an American audience. And this movie had a lot of nudity, and I think it took place in Amsterdam. And it also mentioned the red light district, I think. So think of like the 80s and the Americans being very stuck up with movies and stuff like that. Like a nipple. No, 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 no. That nipple? No, we don't do nipples here. But looking at like the Dutch television in the 80s, like nudity was everywhere. Like it was seriously everywhere. We still had like massive nude beaches. We still have nude beaches nowadays, but like they're not massive anymore. Not many people go there anymore. We are Americanizing, I feel, as time goes on. We are losing a lot of parts of our culture that I grew up in that are not the same nowadays. Like for me as a young child, we would go to a nude beach, which was very normal. And my mom would just strip down, be nude, and all those grown men and women were just nude. And we as children had the choice of being nude or having something on our skin because, I mean, we were children, so we didn't need to listen to all the rules, which is nice. But nudity was very normal on TV, on like billboards, all that stuff. Nowadays, you rarely see it. It's not that massive. It's not that in your face anymore. A lot of things here are Americanizing, like our healthcare system. It's very expensive nowadays. We used to be like a welvaartsstaat, like a welfare state, where the government would pay for us being healthy. Like your health insurance back in the 90s was like 40 gulden for an entire family. I pay like more than 200 euros a month, and not everything is covered in my insurance. Like it's more not covered than it is covered. So, and I already have one of the more expensive packages, and still a lot is not covered. So yeah, it's all about the money. It's all about the money, and
that sounds unfortunately very American. Obviously, I live here in the United States, and I have to deal with that, and it's awful. It's the worst. I hate it. I hate dealing with health insurance companies, and I hate paying an exorbitant amount of money.
Oh yeah.
For, I don't know how good your package is, but mine is not great, to say the very least. So let's talk about one final thing with respects to visiting, and that is that it's something that I would say it's definitely not been Americanized, and I would say it's distinctly very Dutch, and that is the bicycle culture. So bicycling in the Netherlands is huge. It's how a lot of people get around the entire country. There are bike paths everywhere. There are bike highways. How did that happen? What created the necessary elements for the Netherlands to become a bicycling country? Because it's not all of Europe. I mean, Paris is doing some really cool stuff right now. Germany has some cool things. There's Copenhagen, which I would argue is the closest city to the Netherlands or Amsterdam in terms of the bikeability of it. But what is it about the Netherlands specifically that allows it to become such a bicycling mecca.
If you have to bike and you have to go up and downhill, up and downhill, up and downhill while you bike to work, you don't want to bike to work anymore. But the Netherlands is flat. So the only bad thing here is the wind. Because it doesn't matter which way you go, and it doesn't matter which way they say the wind is blowing, you always have the wind straight in your face when you bike in the Netherlands. This is just a thing. Everyone that has visited the Netherlands or lives in the Netherlands know I am speaking the truth. Because in the morning that I was biking to school and I would go one way, I would have like the wind blowing like straight in my face, barely moving forward. And then at the end of the day, I would bike home and it's the same thing. Wind in my face, barely any movement. And then once every blue moon, and this does not happen often, but once every blue moon, you would have the wind in your back and you would bike like 10 kilometers faster than you've ever have. And it was the best feeling ever. It was like flying. So I think it's because of that. You can have that one time of wind in your back and feel like you're actually flying while riding on a bike in the flat country of the Netherlands. And I think that's why we just kept building bike lanes upon bike lanes. And we have the most bike lanes of any country. Like the amount of bike lanes, the kilometers, if you total that, it's the highest percentage of any country in the world. And we are tiny. Yeah. We have more bikes than people. We have we have 22 million bikes in this country, and we have less than 18 million inhabitants. And yes, the canals in Amsterdam are flooded with bikes, and we dredge them every couple months, and then they get flooded with bikes again. Yeah.
It's very impressive. Again, I've been there, and well, you have it all. I mean, so in spending time there, it is truly a different kind of experience, versus the United States where it's very car dependent. I ride my bike all around here in Portland. Portland is better than most U.S. cities. It has the highest percentage of bicycle riders of any city inside the United States, any major city, I should say. But it's nothing close to Amsterdam or Rotterdam or Utrecht or basically anywhere in the Netherlands. So I think this is a case because the Netherlands has so many separated bike lanes. It makes it a lot easier and it feels very comfortable. The one thing I will say though, especially when I was in Delft and I was going back and forth I was studying at TU Delft, the university there, that there was a lot of mopeds on the bike lanes, which were a little scarier for us just because, well, they're faster and heavier, right?
But like the mopeds, the scooters and all that stuff, they have to have like a special license to even drive those. So they have been taught how to drive those and be mindful of the cyclists.
Well, that's good to know for the next time I'm there. Kayleigh, this has been such a fun episode to explore the Netherlands with us. You helped us experience it in a way that I certainly could never have brought to my listeners. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate you coming on today and taking time out of your day. Please tell my listeners where they can find you if they want to find your stuff online or around the internet, whatever.
So if you're any people in your audience like history as in the Stone Age, because I do way, way old history, and like human evolution and new archaeological discoveries, they can find me on History with Kayleigh on YouTube. And I'm also touring in Turkey later this year in October. And if any of them are interested in seeing one of the oldest man-made buildings ever created, nearly 12,000 years old, I mean, old stuff, Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, that's the names. I'm going to see them and the surrounding area and the geography of that area, which is absolutely mind-blowing. And your people can join me if they go to thecommunitygarden.org/retreats/history-with-Kayleigh. And we're also going to see Derinkuyu, which is a very large underground city in Cappadocia in Turkey. It used to house 25,000 people. Massive underground city. We're also going there, and we're going a few levels deep. We're not going the deepest because, hi, have you met me? I'm claustrophobic. So we're going in it a few levels, and then we're calling it today. But yeah, I'm going to tour Turkey, and I'm very excited because I've never been to Turkey. Like you mentioned Turkey earlier, of it being Do I see it as European? No, I do not see it as European. But I think the Turkish people, especially the ones that came to the Netherlands and are living here, they're definitely European. And they make me love Turkish food. And I want some kebab, like right now. So I'm excited to go to Turkey in October. And your viewers can also find me on Instagram and Threads with History with Kayleigh, or on Twitter at Kayleigh History. And my Threads and Twitter is more like meme posting, retweeting, and all that stuff. And sometimes I talk down to some men being dumb. And this is part of being a woman, I think, in this day and age. On Instagram, unfortunately, on Instagram, I do the occasional selfie or like a picture of one of my travels. And professional work, YouTube. Not professional stuff, just me being a weirdo on the rest.
Well, listener, all of those links, Kayleigh's YouTube channel, Kayleigh's socials, this trip to Turkey, you can find all of them in the show notes if you're listening on one of the very many podcast apps, or inside the description on the YouTube video if you're watching over here on YouTube. However you're watching through this or listening through this, you can find those links. Please do check those out. I feel like that Turkey trip would be a really phenomenal to join as well. I might have to look into that myself. We'll see. I don't know what I have going on in October yet. Thank you for watching and listening today. This has been a really fun exploration of the Netherlands. I really enjoy this. I'm not really sure what country we're doing next because I'm recording this well ahead of our launch. I'm not even actually sure what order these will be in yet. So I guess all that's to say is I'll come back next week and there'll be another country or state, potentially a city waiting for you, and you can learn all about that one. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the more than dozen podcast apps out there, please rate and review the podcast. It really helps do something for me. I'm actually not sure what it does, but it's nice to see. It's very nice to see. So do that, please. And if you're watching on YouTube, then please, I guess like and subscribe to my channel, or like the video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that already. Again, it helps me out a little bit. And I guess, until then, please stay geographical and, come back next week for another country.